The quiet panic. This is something that's been haunting me for months now, and I finally have the courage to share what happened. You guys have been asking for more stories about encounters that changed everything, and this one absolutely fits that description. What I'm about to tell you sounds like it came straight out of a nightmare, but I promise you every single word is true. It started on what should have been a perfectly normal Tuesday evening in October. I was walking home from my job at the campus bookstore, taking the usual route through the residential area just off Main Street. The sun was setting earlier now, casting these long shadows between the houses, and there was this crisp autumn air that made everything feel peaceful. I had my headphones in, just minding my own business when I first saw her. She was standing at the corner of Maple and 3rd, completely still, wearing this bright red hooded jacket that seemed to glow against the darkening sky. At first, I didn't think much of it. People wait at corners all the time, right? But as I got closer, something felt off. She wasn't looking at her phone or checking for traffic. She was just standing there facing the street with her hood pulled up so I couldn't see her face. I crossed to the other side of the street without really thinking about it. Call it intuition or whatever, but something about her made my skin crawl. As I passed by, I glanced over, and that's when I noticed she had turned to watch me. Still couldn't see her face because of that hood, but I could feel her eyes on me. It was like being watched by a predator. The next day, same time, same corner, there she was again. Same red hood, same perfectly still posture. This time I paid more attention. She was average height, maybe 5'6", and thin. Really thin, like unhealthily so. The red jacket looked expensive, not some cheap knockoff, and it was pristine clean despite the fact that it had rained the night before. I decided to test something. Instead of crossing the street, I kept walking straight toward her. As I got within maybe 20 feet, she turned and started walking away. Not fast, not slow. Just this measured pace that somehow felt deliberate. She walked to the end of the block and turned left onto Pine Street. When I reached the corner and looked down Pine, she was gone, completely vanished. This became a pattern for the next 2 weeks. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she'd be at that corner around 6:30. Every time I approached, she'd walk away and disappear. I started changing my route, leaving work at different times, but somehow she always knew when I was coming. It was like she could sense me from blocks away. My roommate Jake thought I was losing it. He kept saying it was probably just someone who lived in the neighborhood, maybe someone with social anxiety who didn't like confrontation. But Jake didn't see what I saw. He didn't feel that cold dread that washed over me every time I spotted that red hood in the distance. Things escalated 3 weeks into this routine. I was walking home on a Friday this time, not my usual Tuesday or Thursday, thinking maybe I'd avoid her altogether. The street was completely empty, which was weird because it was only 7 o'clock and people were usually out walking their dogs or coming home from work. But there was nobody. No cars, no pedestrians, just me and the sound of my footsteps echoing off the houses. That's when I heard it. Footsteps behind me, matching my pace exactly. Step for step, like an echo, but just slightly delayed. I slowed down. The footsteps slowed down. I sped up. They sped up. My heart started racing as I realized someone was deliberately mimicking my movements. I stopped completely and turned around. The street behind me was empty. Nothing but shadows and streetlights starting to flicker on. But I could swear I caught a glimpse of red disappearing behind a parked car about half a block back. I started walking again, faster this time, and the footsteps returned. This time I could tell they were coming from someone wearing soft-soled shoes, maybe sneakers or flats. The sound was barely audible, but in the dead silence of that empty street I could hear every step. When I reached the corner where I usually saw her, I stopped and called out, "I know you're following me. What do you want?" My voice sounded shakier than I intended, and it seemed to get swallowed up by the darkness. No response, but the footsteps stopped too. I stood there for what felt like forever, just listening. Then from somewhere behind me, I heard this sound that made my blood run cold. It was laughing. Not a normal laugh, but this high-pitched, almost childlike giggling that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It bounced off the houses and echoed down the empty street until I couldn't tell where it was coming from. I ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I ran the remaining 4 blocks to my apartment like my life depended on it, and I didn't stop until I was inside with the door locked behind me. Jake found me sitting on the couch, breathing hard and probably looking like I'd seen a ghost. When I told him what happened, he insisted on walking with me for the next few days. Having someone else there made me feel better, and for almost a week everything seemed normal. No Red Hood, no mysterious footsteps, no creepy laughter. I started to think maybe she'd moved on, found someone else to torment, or maybe Jake had been right and it was all in my head. But then Jake got sick with the flu and couldn't come with me. I had to walk home alone for the first time in a week, and I was nervous about it. I left work early, thinking if I changed my schedule completely, I could avoid whatever game she was playing. I made it 3 blocks before I saw her. Not at the usual corner this time, but standing directly in the middle of the sidewalk about 50 yards ahead of me. She was facing me, and even though I still couldn't see her face under that hood, I knew she was staring right at me. I stopped walking. She didn't move. We stood there like that for maybe 30 seconds, just facing each other in the growing darkness. Then she raised her hand and waved at me. It was such a normal gesture, the kind of wave you'd give to a neighbor or friend, but coming from her, it felt like a threat. I turned around and started walking back the way I came, planning to take a longer route home through the main streets where there would be more people and lights. But when I looked over my shoulder, she was following me. Not the invisible stalking from before, but openly walking behind me, maintaining the same distance. Every time I looked back, there she was. Red hood up, hands in her pockets, walking with this casual stride like she was just out for an evening stroll. But she never got closer and never fell behind. She stayed exactly 50 yards away, like she was connected to me by an invisible rope. I picked up my pace. She matched it perfectly. I slowed down. She slowed down. I stopped at a crosswalk. She stopped too. It was like some twisted game of follow the leader, except I had no idea what the rules were or how it would end. The worst part was that we were moving through increasingly populated areas now, and nobody else seemed to notice her. People walked right past her like she wasn't there. A jogger ran between us and didn't even glance in her direction. It was like she was invisible to everyone except me. When I finally reached the busy intersection near campus, I ducked into a 24-hour diner, thinking maybe I could lose her in the crowd or at least get help from other people. The place was packed with college students cramming for midterms, and the warm light and normal chatter made me feel safer immediately. I grabbed a booth near the window where I could watch the street and ordered coffee just to have an excuse to stay. For about 10 minutes, everything felt normal again. I started to convince myself that maybe she'd given up, moved on to whatever twisted game she was really playing. Then I saw her across the street, standing under a streetlight, perfectly still, hood up, facing the diner, facing me. Even through the window and across 4 lanes of traffic, I could feel those invisible eyes boring into me. I asked the waitress if I could use the phone to call my roommate, but when I looked up from dialing, she was gone. The spot under the streetlight was empty. I hung up and went back to my booth, thinking maybe this nightmare was finally over. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. On the table next to mine, there was a folded piece of paper that definitely hadn't been there before. My hands were shaking as I reached for it. Written in neat handwriting were just 4 words. "See you at home." I bolted out of that diner so fast I probably looked insane. I ran the entire way back to my apartment, checking over my shoulder every few seconds, but I didn't see her anywhere. When I burst through the door, Jake was sitting on the couch watching TV, looking surprised to see me in such a state. I told him everything that had happened, showed him the note, but he just looked confused. He said I'd been acting paranoid for weeks and maybe I should talk to someone at the campus counseling center. But I knew what I'd experienced was real. That night I barely slept. Every little sound made me jump. The building settling, neighbors walking around upstairs, cars passing outside, it all sounded like footsteps to me. Around 3 in the morning, I finally drifted off, but I woke up 2 hours later to something that made my blood freeze. Tap, 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 tap. Someone was knocking on our apartment door, not pounding or banging, just these light, almost polite taps. But at 5 in the morning, any knock feels sinister. Jake was still asleep, so I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was dimly lit by those cheap fluorescent lights, but I could see well enough to know it was empty. Nobody was there. The knocking stopped. I waited by the door for maybe 5 minutes listening, but heard nothing else. When I finally went back to bed, I was wide awake until sunrise. The next evening, I decided I couldn't live like this anymore. I was going to confront her, demand answers, or at least try to figure out what she wanted from me. I left work at the usual time and took my normal route, actually hoping to see her. She was waiting at the original corner, same as always, but this time was different. This time, when I approached, she didn't walk away. She stood there and let me get close enough to finally see under that hood. I wish I hadn't. Her face was pale, almost white, with dark circles under her eyes that looked like bruises. But it was her expression that really got to me. She was smiling, but it wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide, stretching her face in a way that looked painful. And her eyes, they were completely black. Not just dark brown or dark blue, but black like empty holes. When she spoke, her voice was soft and sweet like a child's voice, but the words made my skin crawl. She said, "I've been waiting for you to notice me. We're going to be such good friends." I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe properly. I just stood there staring at this thing that looked like a person but felt completely wrong. Then she reached out with one pale hand and touched my arm. Her skin was ice cold even through my jacket, and the moment she made contact, I felt this overwhelming sense of dread and hopelessness wash over me. It was like being pulled underwater, like drowning in pure terror. I jerked away from her touch and stumbled backward, and that's when she started laughing again. That same high-pitched, childlike giggling I'd heard before, but now I could see it coming from that horrible stretched smile. I ran harder than I'd ever run in my life. Behind me, I could hear her laughing, getting louder and louder, echoing off the buildings and following me down the street like a living thing. When I got home, I told Jake we needed to move. He thought I was having some kind of breakdown, but I didn't care. I packed everything I owned that night and crashed at a friend's place across town. That was 3 months ago, and I haven't seen her since. But I know she's still out there. Sometimes late at night, I'll get text messages from numbers I don't recognize. Just simple messages like, "I miss you," or "When are you coming home?" And sometimes when I'm walking alone after dark, I'll catch a glimpse of red in my peripheral vision. I did some research after everything happened, trying to find some explanation for what I experienced. What I found wasn't comforting. There are stories going back decades about a girl in a red hood who appears to certain people, always following the same pattern. She picks someone, studies them, follows them, and then makes contact. According to what I found, she feeds on fear and isolation. The more afraid you become, the stronger she gets. Some people reported that she eventually stopped appearing after they moved away, but others said she found them no matter where they went. I don't know what she was or what she wanted from me specifically. Maybe I'll never know. But I do know that if you ever see a girl in a red hood watching you from street corners, if you ever feel like you're being followed by footsteps that match your own, don't ignore it. Don't convince yourself it's nothing. Because she's real, she's patient, and once she notices you, she doesn't forget. If this video helped you in any way, or if you've had similar experiences you want to share, let me know in the comments. And if you're walking alone at night and you see something red in your peripheral vision, whatever you do, don't look directly at it. Just keep walking and hope she's not interested in you. Stay safe out there, everyone. You never know who might be watching.